All right, welcome everyone, and welcome back to another episode of No Capes, the show where we talk about creator-owned comics with creators who own comics. Joining me today is the phenomenal Hassan OE, one of the most prolific creators that I follow on any social media in the comics community. Almost every book I read, I see your name in, Hassan. Let's tell everyone a little bit about what you do.
Yeah, I letter comics, and I edit Panel by Panel magazine, and that on a semi-regular basis, I do a YouTube series called Strip Panel Naked, where we dive into comic book storytelling. But yeah, I mean, mostly my day is spent putting words into balloons and drawing sound effects.
I love your sound effects posts on Twitter. It's
Oh,
all,
thanks.
yeah.
Yeah,
Anytime I scroll past and see one, I just stop and just for a bit.
it's the only you can't like. I always find it hard to like post, because I feel like the balloons a lot of the time are like the spoilers for stuff.
Yeah.
So it's like I always find like artists can post like a panel and it's like out of context, it's quite hard. But if I post like a balloon where it's like, "Oh, you were the villain all along, X," and you're like, "Oh well, yeah, I probably can't post that." So most of like the dialogue in the balloons that I post is just not real. It's not from
Yeah.
anything. It's just like I've made it up.
Yep.
But the balloon will be like a balloon, so it'll be like my secret which panel it's from. But yeah, I feel like we can never post. I can never post the dialogues. It's always too specific.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I always
I always get
wondered if
jealous.
the dialogue balloons that you posted were actual dialogue from something or just a
Oh,
here's something cool I designed.
yeah, that was almost never is the is the dialogue from the actual book. It's usually just me that I've just like written something to fill in the space. I just feel because I always feel like I feel jealous. Like Kurt Michael Russell, K. Michael Russell always who colors Blue Flame, which I letter, always does these like cool like coloring like live coloring things where you'll take like
Yeah.
a page of Blue Flame and like color it live. And I'm like, I can't. I'd love to do that with the lettering, but I can't because it'll like there's just so many spoilers in the dialogue that
Yeah,
I
that
just
makes
can't.
sense.
I can't do that unless it's already the book's already out. In which case, I'm just sort of awkwardly relettering a page. But the best I can do is to just post an empty balloon or just some fake dialogue.
Although that
So that's
could
what
be
you
a
get.
fun exercise, taking like old retro comics and
Yeah,
relettering them.
I did. You know what? There's a book coming out that's just been announced called Agent of World. That's written by Dennis Camp, and that was actually the very first thing I ever lettered back in 2016, maybe,
Yeah.
because I was friends with Dennis, and he sent me these pages of art just so I could learn to letter over
Yep, yep.
his this script and this letter this art, and I lettered that book over the years, uh, for maybe 4 or 5 times, because each time we went back to it, I was looked at the work and I was like, this is terrible, and so it's now coming out in July, and it's like like my fourth re-letter of that book or something. So at some point, I might show that process from really terrible, like literally just learning, following tutorials, and lettering that book to where it got to the latest stage, so people can see the growth of from terrible
Yeah,
to
yeah.
less terrible
That would
over
actually
the
be
four
really
over the
interesting.
4 years. Yeah, that's probably the closest I've got to like this is how not to do it, and this is not how to do it, but like how not to do it less worse.
Yeah, yeah. I get you. Although I'm not gonna lie, I would consider your work how to do it. There's no one way to do it, but I would consider your work a very acceptable how to do it because your way is a good way.
I consider it like the lesser of some evils. That's
we
my just my
we are
half
all
Britishness
our
kicking
own
in.
worst
That's
critics.
the
But yeah, so today's book was picked by you. So do you want to introduce it?
yeah. This is the book tour by Andy Watson, who I was more familiar with from their like sort of more like young like mid grades young adult work. And this was recommended to me by Tiffany Babb, who's a co-edits Panel by Panel magazine, and she's a really good writer and editor. And so whenever Tiffany recommends me something, I'm like, this will be good. So I got a copy, and I was like, I'll just have a look at it, and then next thing I know, like I was on the last page, and I was like, this is absolutely incredible. It's basically the story of a writer of kind of like literary fiction, called Fretwell, which is just a great like Charles Dickens esque name. who goes on a book tour to promote his latest book, and it's just a series of really unfortunate events happen that eventually lead to him being sort of framed or integrated into a series of murders that have been happening along the same sort of path of his
Yeah,
tour of books to promote his the tour of bookshop, sorry, to promote his novel.
it's so sad. The poor guy's just trying to go about his day, and just everywhere he turns, the disrespect.
It's just something goes wrong in like a really in like a really sort of like quietly British way where his life is really like, I mean, from start to finish there's a drastic change in what happens in his life, but the whole way through he is just almost like so apologetic for his own existence,
Yeah,
which I like feels like a very British mindset that like no matter what goes wrong, he's like convinced it's probably his fault, but somehow. And it's also like very not I don't know if it's metafiction is the right way to describe it, but it reminded me a lot of City of Glass, the Paul Auster novel, and the really good David Mazzucchelli adaptation of it, where he slowly sort of gets subsumed into the city as a whole. But yeah, I just love it. I think the story, the craft of it, just absolutely fascinating. I love it. I love it a lot.
yeah, yeah. I wasn't sure what to expect, and actually, like the art style is really interesting and enjoyable. It's very understated, but like in a way that serves the tone of the story really
Mhm.
well.
Yeah,
And yeah,
there's a shakiness to the line that I think is like a kind of unsteadiness to the line that is like very replicated in Fretwell's general anxiety of life.
yeah. Well, it's a very apt name, isn't it? Because he does fret quite well.
Yeah, I don't know if that's like I mean that's one of those things whenever I see characters named like that it just makes me think of like Dickens, and that very it's like a very British feels like a very sort of British tradition of giving these characters like ridiculous names like that are just immediately like his name is Fretwell and you can already sort of picture what that person might be like.
Yeah, and look, I honestly, in a less British kind of way, but in a more neurodivergent way, I can so relate to his just general level of anxiety and yeah,
Right.
I'm sorry about everything.
It really is that. It's like it's so easy to feel. I mean, the central sort of plot line is that people keep getting murdered that that like are at the places that he's doing his book tour,
Yeah.
his book signing, and it's to the audience, to the reader, you just know. I mean, it's we know it's not him. It's not like a secret mystery that it might actually be revealed to him, or we can see
No,
him doing
yeah,
it. We
it's
know
like
it's not him.
yeah, he leaves and goes home, has a sad steak in his room,
Yeah,
and then tries to call his wife, has a very sad conversation, and goes to bed. And then the next day, the cops are there going, "Hey, buddy."
yeah.
So you
He's
seem to
just in
be,
everyone's way.
yeah,
I think that's just the thing. He's just in everyone's way. He seems to be in the way of his wife. He seems to be in the way of his kid. He seems to be in the way of the people that run the bookstores that he's doing his signings at. He seems to be in the way of the customers. Just his entire life is spent in the way of other people, uh, and it's just I don't know. It's just great. It's just yeah. Every element of it, I'm just absolutely fascinated by.
yep. And it's just so sad every time he gets to a place and his books aren't there.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. Like I'm not like I'm not a writer uh, or anyone that's done like a book tour or anything like that. I've been to, I've been to shows and sat behind a table,
Yeah,
uh, which is not really the same experience as where you're invited, but you like as being invited to a place to like sell your book and then arriving there, just no one cares. Like
yeah,
there's a level of like you're sort of well known enough to have been invited to this thing, and then you arrive and just people just don't care. Like and like that's such a level of like. But he takes it so well. I think that's what's great. He's just sort of like it's
yeah.
almost like an acknowledgement on his part that like yeah, why would people show up? Like people don't care.
Yeah. He takes it on the chin quite well, but yeah, just yeah. The people not being there is sad enough, but like 2 or 3 of the shops where he turns up and like his books aren't even there, and his books are stolen at the start
Yeah,
as
yeah,
well.
yeah.
Like the books he did have were stolen, and then the books that were supposed to be waiting for him at the shop are either not there or had the shop owner has lost.
Hmm.
I just
There's a line that I can't remember if it's one of the shopkeepers or if it's I think it is one of the people that works at the shop, and uh, they just say to him like, "Do you actually want to do this? Like, should we? Are we
yes. You
like
want
do
to
we?"
go
Or is,
through
I
with
can't remember if
this?
it's Fretwell that says that.
You sure you want to go through with this?
Yeah, do you want to go through with this?
And then yeah, he comes in and she hasn't even cleaned
It's like
up
that's
from
just a
the
great
day before.
yeah.
The table's covered
Yeah, well,
in
that's the other element of
wine
it is
and
yeah, he's kind of on the heels of another author who is seemingly having like a much better time than him because
yeah,
he's always like the day after the other author's signings, and you're right, like he's always turning up to bookshops and they've had a great day the previous day with this other author, um, which ties into the ending in my interpretation of the ending a little bit. But yeah, it's yeah, FP Guys
yeah,
is the other author. Yeah, Sierra Umbra is the book, and he just keeps turning up and he's just like a day ago was a great time with this great author who seems to be very charismatic and people love his work, and then Fretwell, this sort of anxious, like sort of afraid of taking up too much space, turns up and just has this really terrible
yeah, yeah, and it's the same publisher too. Like it's his
day.
publisher that's promoting this other guy.
Yeah.
I,
Yeah, and I mean, there's so many horrible like even the conversation he has at one point he goes to dinner. He's supposed to be going to dinner with his editor,
yeah,
and then just someone like a junior editor from the poetry side turns up and they have this really horrible conversation where the editor's just talking to him about this junior editor's just talking to him about how he wants to become more successful and how Fretwell isn't very successful and they're probably not going to publish Fretwell's book, and the company that publishes his book is moving to smaller offices and downsizing and all this stuff,
yeah,
and
right.
it's just yeah it's just him existing in situations where if he was not there the situation would probably be the same, like that editor's conversation had nothing to do with Fretwell. Essentially, it was all about himself. You,
Yeah,
you mentioned before we did this, like he at the end, he's talking to a psychiatrist, and psychiatrist just ends up talking about himself. It's just a series of situations where if Fretwell was not in the scene, it would carry on as normal.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, that guy probably would be sitting there talking to himself about how this other author that work has signed is actually yeah, he'd be having the exact same conversation with the lady
Yeah,
friend that he's going out to dinner with.
yeah, yeah.
It's just yeah, Fretwell could just be swapped out for anybody else, and the situation would remain.
That's part of like the. So this is the thing that made me think of City of Glass as well. Is there's a bit near the end where Fretwell just like falls asleep on the street. He like finds this little corner of like kind of tucked away. I think it's like next to a bridge or something. I can't if I can find the right page, but he is sort of essentially kind of like on the run from the cops. That's it, and he kind of runs under this bridge, and he finds a homeless person in this little sort of
Yeah,
crevice under the bridge, and goes in there and just falls asleep there, and just becomes like essentially invisible in part of the city, which is a very sort of feels like a little nod to City of Glass, where this detective is kind of like staking out a building and just slowly becomes, it's almost like he becomes part of the city. He hides down this alleyway, and just slowly his existence just ceases to be
yeah,
as he just becomes part of the city, the texture of the city. And it's like that. It's like that is just a culmination of everything that's happened to him in the story up to that point, which is that he just hasn't existed. He just disappears and forms part of the architecture and part of the structure of the world around him, and his life is essentially no different. And also the detectives just seem to know exactly where he'll be because of course
yeah,
where else would where else would Fretwell be, because that he's just an invisible agent in the city.
right. Yeah, like they there. He falls asleep in the street, has his shoes stolen, and then they still know exact. They just stumble across him.
Yeah, yeah.
Although I think there was a different set of cops because they didn't address him by name.
I think it's the same because I remember the fella from the uh I think it's the two detectives,
It
right,
it is.
who
Oh, I couldn't
uh
remember.
Oh no, I know it isn't. No, it isn't. You're right. It's two different detectives because he's got a different face.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I mean. Like, it's
Yeah,
just
no, you're
another
right. Yeah,
random pair of cops that have just shown up and like, my
they
bud,
just know where he'll be. Yeah, yeah. It really is. It's like, I mean, there's so many things that I don't know. Like, there's so many bits of it that feel like a commentary on the situation that maybe I'm not. Don't that maybe don't pull me as much as sort of the more like metatextual parts. But like, so there's essentially, he's going around and then all these people get murdered, and it's implied that he's probably the one killing them because, of course. Um, and so they end up like they end up like burning his books right in the street near the end, and everyone's calling for him to be, as he's trying to disappear, everyone assumes it's him, and so they're calling for him to be arrested, and they're like destroying his work and everything like that. And so it's like all these books that no one's read are now getting destroyed. But what's so great about it, I thought, was that that sort of plot line is that there is another. It's so funny to me that there is another author who is doing the exact same journey as him,
yeah,
like the exact same set of bookshops, uh, and yet there's just never any. You never see
yeah,
that person, and
yeah,
there's
yeah,
never
right.
any
And
like
there's no
implication that it's them.
exactly. There's no discussion at any
Yeah,
point that it could be this HP guys
yeah,
doing the murders,
yeah.
being the
It's just
crime,
there's just something about the demeanor of him of Fretwell that you just think, well, yeah, I mean, this guy's this guy's the killer.
right? Yeah, he's such a portrait of the maladjusted, depressed, burnt out office drone type trope.
Yeah, yeah.
But he's really just trying to do his best.
I mean, yeah, he's just there's he's just very plain, right? There's just you sort
Yeah,
of I think he's plain enough that you end up imparting what you need to impart on him from your own perspective as a reader. But his characteristics are essentially none, right? But he's just sort of nondescript. He's got a slightly sort of fluffy hair, but apart from that, he's kind of just like slightly nondescript as partly with the sort of Andy Watson's art style, but it's like whatever sort of judgments I feel like I make about Fretwell are heavily brought by me as necessarily as opposed to Andy Watson. I think
yeah,
Andy Watson just gives you a kind of a good canvas to paint what you believe Fretwell to be like.
right?
But there's just so many, which I like to me is like a fun thing of comics where you can if you kind of heavily render a book, like if Andy Watson did this in like I don't know, like a super realistic, heavily rendered style, then you might see Fretwell as a more specific person. But because the
Yeah,
art is so open, the lines are so open, it's like he's we can make him be what we need him to be, and in this case, that plainness helps with his kind of like slight softness and awkwardness.
yep.
But it's definitely heightened by what we bring to it, I think.
Yeah, and I sort of get the energy from him that he's like if Mitchell and Webb had a baby,
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah,
a
yeah.
very strong blend of their features and just that sad sack attitude that Mitchell had in Peep Show.
Hmm, hmm. Yeah, I think it's a very. I don't like. I think keep going to the Britishness, but I think that is a very British quality
Yeah,
of that just sort of silent sadness. But even, I mean, even in his most angry, I don't know if that would be a term you'd ever affix to Fretwell, but even in his most kind of like determined, like right at the very end of the book, he kind of he gets arrested and then he's in jail, and then he gets released at the end when they realize it because someone else dies, I think, and they realize it couldn't be him. And he's like he figured out who it is. Like he in his head is like I think I know who the killer is. And even at that point, the police are like, okay, who cares? Like, right, I'll write it in a ransom letter or whatever, write in a note and send it to us. You're a writer, and he, and even at that point, he's kind of like stubbornly like, this is really annoying that you're not taking what I'm saying seriously. And even in that mode, he's still very like calm, and he's still very calm. He's just like, okay, there's just like an image of his blank. It's like that little blank
yeah.
expression. That's him. That's him at his most kind of like
He's most perturbed.
his most yeah, yeah, that's it. That's the right word. That's basically it. And his face is essentially just variations on that same. I mean, this is two pages later, and it's essentially the same, just the same face. That's him. That's him. Like, I've just solved the case.
Yep.
That's his face.
And actually, that's really interesting that you show me that panel, because like before we hit record, you and I were chatting a bit about manga and stuff, and that's a very manga disappointed face panel right there, with the stark lines in the background and the little eyes just.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly it. I think the part of what I like, the story is very slight, as I guess I would say for this, that there isn't much that necessarily happens beyond just a series of vignettes where he um, just exists as Fretwell in this space while other people kind of act around him. But I think what's so exciting about it for me was the style of it. I just absolutely love the style of it. The way the dialogue is paced feels very manga-esque,
Mm,
where there isn't like tons and tons of I don't think there's any back and forths in any of the panels. It's like one image dialogue, one image
yeah,
question, one image response, one image question, one image response. Um, there's like such a solid pace to the dialogue, and it means that like nothing ever seems to like run over itself. Like the reactions of Fretwell's like blank face are on one beat of dialogue, just him saying yeah, no problem, or just asking a simple question or anything like that. It's not no There's never any moment of like overloaded monologuing, which you get in when you've got to fit loads of stuff into 20 pages of monthly comics or whatever. It's just very I mean, that's like a good, you can see that. But I don't me help holding stuff up is any use
yeah.
or not, but like that page is just that back and forth dialogue, um, and I find like that pacing really really interesting because it feels like to me like it feels like super comics where you can really start to act, and so much of it is like you were saying, like the simplified sort of like simplified style, I suppose, and that really helps sell the emotion in a way that's very very like upfront. There's no
Yeah.
over the top. You don't need to like read a face for too long. You could just be like, oh, that's just a blank face. That's someone that is annoyed at this person. That's someone
Yep,
that's
yep.
trying to smile but isn't working. Yeah,
Actually, that you make me think right now of good old Scott McCloud's Understanding Comics, and talking
yeah,
about stylization and how much you can simplify a face before it doesn't look like a face anymore, and how simply you can portray emotion.
yeah.
And this
Well,
book does that very, very well.
yeah, it's like it's defined enough that you get like a sense of what Fretwell looks like. Like you get a sense of his hair, you get a sense of his posture, even though his hair is just like part of his head. Like it's
Yeah.
just the outline of his head just kind of carries on. Like The Simpsons or whatever. It's like that style.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah, it's like Poppy
and
Bart
his
Simpson.
Yeah, exactly. And his face is four lines, three lines. It's two dots,
Yeah,
one
it's a little
line nose,
U-shaped
and
line for the
that's
nose.
it. So it's like as kind of like minimized as you could get it, while still you still have an understanding of what Fretwell looks like.
Right,
Like
yeah.
it's not just a blank circle.
Yeah.
I can still
Like
see his look.
on page 50, where the cops first turn up, and you can see his hopeful little smile when he's like, "Oh, you're from the literary review?"
Yeah, yeah.
And then his hopes dashed on the next page.
But it's even like, yeah, it's wonderful. It's like even the like the shapes, and which is like it reminded me of Sirius Pollard. But I don't know why I'm talking so much about David Mazzucchelli, but like the in each of the face designs is an implication of the character. Like Fretwell has this kind of like soft, like straight line jawline, which matches with his demeanor of these like sort of gently sloping
Mm,
shoulders on his character. Whereas when you look at the cops, they've got these much more angular faces.
yes,
Like there's the cop
yes.
with the much more broad chin. There's the cop with the kind of jutting out
The
cheeks. Like they
scraggly,
have,
yeah, like
yeah,
the main cop gives me sort of, Bruce Willis, Patrick Warburton, old mate
yeah,
that played The Thing. I've forgotten his name right
yeah,
now.
yeah, yeah.
Those sort of
That's Patrick
vibes.
Warburton, right? Yeah.
And the other inspector makes me think of the little dude that's from The Office and also Pirates of the Caribbean.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Detectorist guy. Gareth. I can't remember his real name.
Yeah, I can't remember his name, but
Mackenzie
yeah,
Crook.
just
Mackenzie
like
Crook. Yeah, that's it.
him
Yeah.
as a cop.
Yeah.
That's the energy I
Yeah,
get
yeah.
from that detective.
That's a real like. I think that's a real. That's like a real difficult skill because you can, like you're saying, like you can see the face of those people, and in the same way, like that, the like that big detective with the the Patrick Warburton chin has got the exact same amount of lines on his face
Yeah, exactly. There's
as
not
Fretwell.
a lot to him, but
Yeah.
the energy is right there.
Hmm. And then with that is right readability, right? So like
Yeah,
this is the fun thing. Like you mentioned, like Fretwell's little smile, like that smile is like an instant. Like you can see that straight away. There isn't the I don't know how to describe it. Like the levels of emotion are sort of so restrained that that little smile is enough for you to completely understand the feeling that he's getting in that
yeah,
moment where he thinks that like these two people might be there to say something nice about his work and not cops. And so when his face drops again, uh, or he's kind of a bit confused and his head just tilts a little bit, like all these things are so small that I don't think you would. It's much harder to get away with that level of subtle acting work when the rendering style is different, I
yeah,
think. And so by like Andy Watson paring everything back, all these moments, the little head tilts, the little the mouth slight mouth change from a line to a dot or whatever, all suddenly read like huge shifts in his like acting and in his emotional range.
yeah.
And that's so smart. It's so clever.
It really is, and like I've said, like you were saying before, like you could, if this was rendered in a full sort of traditional comics book, like Big Two style,
Hmm.
it would not have the same energy at all. It
Yeah, yeah,
it would feel so different. It would still be a good story, but I don't think it would be nearly as charming as this book is.
yeah,
And
yeah.
that's it. Like this book is, it's a depressing kind of story. This poor guy. It's just like a series of more and more embarrassing and unfortunate, ridiculous things happening to him.
Hmm.
But it's such a charming little book to read, and
Yeah,
I love that. I'm really glad that you suggested it, and I got the chance to read it because it really is. It's very charming, and like seeing a story told in full in this way is probably going to inform my own work going forward.
yeah,
Like I don't
yeah.
think I'm going to change my style in a drastic way or anything like that, but
Hmm.
I can feel having read this book that I'm definitely going to take stuff away from this.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I think I think my reading over time has sort of gradually sort of shifted a little bit in terms of what I kind of gravitate towards naturally. And there's just something about like I think it's interesting that I Andy Watson also has done like young adult stuff
Yep.
and kind of like mid grade work as well. Because like that format of I can't remember how long this book is, but that format this is fairly long, 250 about 250 pages. That format of about like 100 to 200 page um graphic novels where or comic books, I don't know why market term.
Mm,
That where you're just telling a whole story, right? Just in this one chunk. And the story is probably not like I think that's the story that you get in the book tour if you were to convert that into like a 20-page monthly comic. It's probably only an issue or two
yeah.
issues worth of like story in across all these 250 pages. But by having the space to like draw that thing out and not have to convince everyone every 20 pages to buy another issue,
Yep.
it completely changes the way that you think about pacing. And completely changes the way that you can approach the telling the story. And like
Yeah.
to me, like I'm
Yeah.
gravitating more towards stuff like this. I think
And honestly,
now
that's
with
kind
time.
of the way I'm gravitating towards writing. Like,
Hmm.
I've always been an artist, but I'm trying to learn how to write short books now because,
Yeah.
I get ideas for stories and I want to put them out there. But
Hmm.
learning how to write comics and stuff like that, I'm finding that I gravitate towards preferring to read a single book that's between 40 and 200 pages.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I'd like a one volume story that's all wrapped up nice and neat. If they come up with a
Hmm.
sequel to it later, I'll read that. But
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
if I I'd find that I'm liking that format a lot more, and I like the
Hmm.
idea of writing that way too, because just what you said, like you can mess around with the pacing and tell the story the way you want it told instead of having
Hmm.
to cram as much excitement into 24 pages as you can to convince someone that they want to buy it next month.
Yeah,
Whereas I'd rather
yeah.
just write one book and be done with it.
Well, I think you know, like slightly moving away from the book tour, I've worked on a lot more single issues recently, where the first issue is like an extended length, like it's got like another 10 pages on it, and it's like 30 pages or whatever. And even just those even just that extra 10 pages is like completely changes the way that like the comic works. And so much of the 20 page, 22 page, 24 page like monthly style has to work around that big ending, right? Because it is sort of an advert as well for the next issue. That it's always fascinating to see people work in different forms. I don't think Andy has done like the single issue thing, but the difference between their work on in the like the mid grade stuff, because we did an interview with Andy for a panel by panel issue like the other year with Penguin Random House, one of their Penguin Random House books, and like the difference between that and this is it's quite drastic. Like the
Yeah,
style is
I
quite
think I remember
different,
seeing that
the
issue come
tone's
out.
quite different. Yeah, it's a fun interview, a fun conversation, and yeah, it's amazing just how different a format allows you to be in your work. Like even from the same art, like the same artist and writer doing uh, a mid-grade book to doing this kind of more adult
Yeah,
fiction. It's a completely different. Like the book is just like a completely different piece of work, and that's like that. I find that absolutely fascinating. And the same thing, like even in like what's the furthest place from here? Like we've done issues of that which were
yes,
like
I'm enjoying that.
uh, it's good, right? And we did issues of that which were like 40 pages or something. Like I can't remember how long the first one is. It was quite big. Uh, and then the pacing on that and what you fit into that is completely different than like the issues we've done, which were more like 20, 24 pages. Not that one is better than the other, but it just changes the way that you have to think about those issues from a writing side. Um, so it's just I don't know, I just love thinking about like how would this book exist if it had to be told in like a different format. And
Yeah,
like this is just like the perfect, there's just something about this which just works so well because it doesn't have to stick to any like strict chapter structures or anything like that.
yeah, and that's it. It's really interesting going from like you said, like format to format, because like when I write for D&D, it's completely different because of the
Yeah,
constraints of the medium. And it's
yeah.
actually like now that you mention it, I think about it, and yeah, it's fascinating how differently your process is and the kind of story you tell based on the
Mhm.
way that story's getting told.
Yeah, yeah. What did you? The question I had for you was, what did you think to? Because I think the intro to this, so the opening of this, is just like a series of pages of Fretwell, just kind of like as a silhouette, like walking. I think it's only like 3 pages, but
Yeah.
walking through the streets just in silence, basically. Um, when you when I said this, chose this as my choice, and you started reading it, what was like your reaction to the opening? Did you get a sense of what it would be from those opening pages, or were you a bit like, what has Hassan sent for me to
Um
read?
well, I was kind of in the middle. I was like, all right. As soon as I saw the art style, I was like, all right.
Yeah,
I'm not sure what to expect here,
yeah,
but I'm liking the vibe.
okay,
Yeah, I
yeah,
was like, I'm not sure what to expect. This is completely different to what I usually read the way that it looks.
yeah, yeah,
Um, this isn't what I was expecting. Like, I didn't really have expectations for it. I
mhm,
wasn't sure what to expect, but it still wasn't what I was expecting.
yeah.
But I immediately was like, yeah, all right, I'm on board. I'm not sure where
Did
this is
you
going yet, but I'm on board.
right? So that's what I was going to ask as well. Did you get a sense like at what how far into it do you think until you kind of were like, right, like I get what this is doing. Like I
Basically, as
kind of
soon as he
I'm
had that
there.
first conversation with his wife, I was like,
Okay.
oh, you poor bastard. This is going to be like Fretwell's series of mildly inconveniencing events.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think that was the same with me. It's like I think when I got to the first conversation and you get that you understand like the tone of it, which is for it's just him stood outside of a door, right? Like where in his
Yeah,
house as he's leaving, and he's trying to speak to his wife, who doesn't
right?
seem to be giving him very much back.
Yeah, and it's like, it's interesting too because we're given no indication of, if either part of the marriage is in the wrong, if
Yeah,
this is just their dynamic, or if he's actually kind of an absent and not really their partner and father, if it's the other way around. Like, we're given no indication of any of that, but all we know is that they're pretty well estranged. It doesn't seem it doesn't seem I'm losing the word. Good old ADHD strikes
happy.
again. It doesn't seem happy, but it doesn't seem combative, I guess, is where I'm sort of going with it.
Right.
They don't seem like angry, violent, combative, bitter, but they're definitely grown apart at some point. And that is
it's very
communicated so clearly.
It's very much like the rest of his interactions in that it's very like you're right now, I can't think of the word. Like, it's very apathetic on both ends. It's kind of just like they're both defeated. It's both very just like, like he says he's leaving, and his wife's like, "What do you mean leaving?" He's like, "I'm going on the book tour." She's like, "Oh, right, the book tour." It's so matter of fact, and so like no one is really interested. Like on either end.
They're both checked out. I mean, he seems like he's maybe a little more checked in, but like this much.
Well, it starts with so when I first read it, like when I first went through those opening pages, it made me think of like the vibe that I got was like friendly Eddie Campbell doing From Hell. It was like I was like, it's From Hell, but like friendlier, slightly more inviting. They had the same sort of like scratchy line, but there was kind of like a charm to it that where with Campbell there was kind of like a violence to it. But it was fun reading it the second time because after you get the intro and then you get this sort of black page with the book tour written on it. And the first thing you see after that is Fretwell's novel, which is called Without K, which is you learn is like a reference to the fact that there's a character in the book whose name is Rebecca, but with two C's, Without K, and he's the guy in it is like a encyclopedia salesman, but one of the encyclopedias, the K encyclopedia, is missing, and he assumes that potentially his wife has taken it. And you don't know that obviously when you first read it, but that frames everything else because you see Without K, and then the next page you see him say Rebecca with the two C's, and then you realize that this guy's also without K and without Rebecca, and that his whole life is a series of events without essentially, everyone's life is like he's the missing encyclopedia. Like, it really doesn't matter that he's gone. But yeah, I like that idea of like the book just straight up, like Andi Watson just straight up is like, this book is this guy's life.
Yeah.
Like this novel, he's just written this novel about his life, but you have to start to piece that together as you read it.
Right. Yeah.
And as you reread it as well, it's like it's an oddly layered book for something that feels very clear when you read it the first time through. There's a lot of like kind of little
as
incidents to it that I didn't notice.
Like, it's never really explicitly said, but it's pretty much revealed that his agent is just going through the motions with this book tour. His accommodation gets progressively shittier. The agent hasn't picked up the tab for the room service like he's supposed to. Some people don't even know who he is when he gets there. They're like, they know they're expecting an author, but I don't fucking know.
And also just the fact that it's been booked the day after another signing, which just seems like
the day
a bad
after.
idea.
And this reviewer that he's trying to find out if these reviewers come out the whole time, he doesn't even know if he got a copy of the book. Because the agency stopped sending them out for the most part. But also that's just left open. It's like, for the most part, we don't really send them out anymore. Maybe yours got sent out. I don't know.
It's like every which I am assuming is every author's worst nightmare, is that everything feels like an afterthought. Like, his existence starts to feel like an afterthought. The book, like his book tour, starts to feel like an afterthought. His missing bag, for the most part, seems to feel like his bag gets stolen at the start with all of his books in it. Starts to feel like an afterthought. And like that feels like a very big commentary on. I mean, that's also a comics thing, right? Like, we're all striving for promotion for the next project, and what you don't want is for your book to start to feel like an afterthought to everyone that could potentially be reading it. So it really does just feel like an author's worst nightmare, that this book has come out and just no one cares, and every moment of it, and suddenly his own existence becomes like an afterthought. but yeah, it's an interesting set of events. I think rendered in just one of the most fun ways I think I've seen. I've read a comic in recently. I don't know how else to describe. I know I keep saying it's very British. I just don't really know how else to describe everything about it. Like even the art style feels
Yeah.
almost like Quentin Blakey.
That's what I was just about to say. I was literally just trying to put the name to the artist. Yeah,
Yeah,
it
it's a
does.
very
It's got
Roald
that vibe.
Dahl-esque. Yeah. At what point did the so this is the other so I was describing it like metatextual, but I
Yep.
don't know if that's the right term. More, it's like self-referential. It's like sort of it's very aware, I think, of what it's doing and the slight sort of ridiculousness that it's doing it at. But I'm trying to figure out when I was going back through it again. I was trying to figure out at what point like that part of the book became obvious to me. And I don't know if it was until maybe the very end when he goes to prison or something. But there was like I was trying to figure out at what point like the at what point you are aware that the book is like aware of what it's doing. I don't know a better way of describing that. But there's a point at which I think it's when he's in prison, and I was like, this is now like this isn't just the story of a man that gets sort of accidentally mixed up in his murder. This is a book that knows that it's telling that story and is
Yeah.
playing with the way that it's telling that story.
Yeah. I started getting the vibes about that when old mate cornered him in the hotel hallway and tried to
All
get him
right,
to go
yeah,
out
yeah,
for
yeah,
drinks.
yeah, right, yeah,
I was just like, yeah, something feels strange about this guy and this point in the story.
yeah.
And then
He has a. Sorry, go on.
no, I was gonna say then everything started rolling downhill a little harder for for old
Right,
Fretwell there.
yeah. No, he has a great face as well. That sort of like dishevelled uh drunk guy that he meets in the yeah this is when he's like at like a in like a basement room, right? In that
Yeah.
his like level of accommodation has gone down so far um that he says, oh, that's it, that he asks the
By the hour or
he
by
asks the bookshop. That was it. Yeah, it's like yeah, it's one of those places by the hour or by the night. um but he's got a reservation, which is great. I love that part. He's got a reservation for that room. And it's just in like a basement, and he meets this disheveled sort of drunk guy who wants to go out for a drink with him, and then
and,
goes into his room, and
and
it's just
isn't
like a
that guy a
bed and a
writer
sink.
as well? I thought that guy said he was
Oh yeah,
also
he
a writer.
is. Yeah, he is. Yeah, he is.
And I mean that's
This I
gotta
mean, well, this is a great because the drunk guy says to him, "I could have swear we've met at some other book bash," and Fretwell says no because he's trying to hide who he is. And the guy says, "You must have one of those faces," and it moves back to Fretwell's blank, like
yeah.
almost no distinguishing features, and he says, "Yeah, I must have." Like there's moments like that that just feel like really on the nose in terms of like Andy Watson being like, I know what we're like, I know what we're doing, and you know what we're doing.
Yeah.
This blank face that could be absolutely anyone is, yeah, he definitely Fretwell literally has one of those faces that could be almost anyone. Yeah, no, I love that scene, and he goes into his tiny room and opens the closet, and then all like the
Yeah, all the
cleaning
junk falls
supplies and
out.
stuff all
Yeah.
like fall out of the. Yeah, yeah. Was there a moment? Was there a moment when you were like, "This is if I wasn't having to read it for this show, that this would probably be the bit I'd check out," or were you all the way? Were you in all the way through?
No, it's pretty much like 5 pages in, I was like, this isn't what I would normally read, but like, I want to keep reading this. I was compelled to keep reading. At no point have I
Yeah, yeah,
not enjoyed reading it. At no point did I feel like I would stop reading this if it wasn't for the show. It was like just like this isn't what I
yeah.
would normally pick up if I didn't know it existed. But because it's been
Mhm.
suggested to me and I'm reading it, yeah, I'm gonna finish this. And that was like this. That was the same with Ted and Roe when they suggested I do Witch Hat Atelier. I wouldn't have
Yeah.
picked that up off the shelf, but as soon as I
Mhm.
started reading it, I was like, yeah. And by the time I got to the end of the book, like I said, I'd ended up buying the next one, and then the next one, and the next one, and I'd read everything that was out until that date by the next day.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think this is that's one thing about like the style of this and the function of manga in many respects. Like I remember reading an interview with Naoki Urasawa, who did like Master Keaton and Monster and stuff. And he was talking about how sad it is that they spend so long drawing these pages, but they're designed, you know, especially a lot of manga feels like it's designed to be read like quite a quick clip. Like it's not. I think Western comics can be quite much more dense in terms of like information on the page.
Yeah.
Whereas manga is like, you know, you said you read like 3-4 volumes or whatever, of which I tell you, you just go once you start, you can just burn through those volumes in no time at all, and they're designed to be like that. And I think this has a really similar vibe to it because there's pages with tons and tons of panels, right? Like most pages have got like 8-9 panels in a lot of cases. Like it's quite visually, it seems like they'll be quite dense, but the style of the rendering and the fact that the dialogue isn't overburdened in the panels means that you end up reading this really really quickly.
Yeah.
And so there's just a natural pace to it, which is, I don't know. I find that really like just really interesting how quick you
and
can
honestly,
get through it.
I burned through those really quickly, but I found myself doubling back quite often. Like I'd read 3 pages, and I'd be like, "Oh, hang on a tick," and just go back and just look at a certain page for like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Not reading it, just looking at it, because it was crafted so well. Like when you're immersed in the story and you're just reading it, it flows and you move to the next page. But as somebody who is like learning the craft, can understand at least some of it, and you know, thanks to my partner, I know a little bit about, you know, art history and sort of looking at stuff because they were an art history student and they've taught me a lot, and they watch a lot of media analysis on YouTube and stuff. So that's been really great for me as a writer and artist, and just as someone doing a show like this too. It's been so helpful. But I find when I read something that engages me like that, I do end up doubling back a few pages and I just stop and look for a while. And there were so many pages in Witch Hat that I had to do that with. Because if I didn't have ADHD, it probably would have taken me more like a week to read all of those volumes. Because I think I read 5 or 6. But for me, once I get started on a graphic novel that hooks me, it is done very quickly. And sometimes I'll have to go back and reread it the next day just to reabsorb it. But yeah, I reckon it would have taken me a week.
That's a function, though. No, I honestly think that's a function because, like, you know, I have these like big volumes of Monster by Urasawa, which are like they're like double thickness ones, right? So it's kind of like 2 regular. I think it's like 1,000 pages. And I was like reading one of those in one section. Like I was just start to finish because it's kind of like they work at like an almost relentless, like breakneck pace. There isn't anything like overstuffed visually. The dialogue keeps moving really, really quickly, and like the book tour just really has the same thing for me. Like part of it is like that restraint in the artistic style. Like it's not over rendered or anything like that. It's very simple.
Speaking of the rendering, though, actually, now that you mention it, page 98, where the cops confront him at the restaurant, I love that big panel that takes up the top 2/3 of the page. That is like the most rendered out of the book so far.
Yeah.
And it's such a cool and interesting style. And then when you look at it, all of the panels where there are 3 or more characters in it are rendered in a similar style. Just slightly heavier strokes, a little more scribbly, a bit more shadow, compared to the lines being a bit crisper and finer in the panels with just 1 or 2 characters in it. And
well, most of the dialogue bits, Andy gets rid of almost all the background.
Yeah,
as well.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a really nice. That's a piece of illustration as well. That's really nice.
It is.
Shot of them.
And honestly, I'm glad that the old Kindle reader had that on the left-hand side of the screen so the audience could actually see it. Because for anyone who doesn't know, Comixology has just gone through a massive change, and it doesn't exist online anymore, which means that my usual way of displaying the comics for you to check out as we talk doesn't exist anymore. And this book I had to get for the Kindle Cloud Reader, and it's a lot trickier to set up for the show. So you're only seeing every second or third page because it's only showing the pages on the left-hand side of the book. And I was really, really glad that that one was a page that showed up on the left hand. You're only seeing even-numbered pages, not odd-numbered pages, which I actually kind of like for this episode anyway, because I don't want you to see everything. There's a lot of stuff that I want you to see for yourself when you go and read it, and it will be linked in the description for you to go and read it. Even if this doesn't look like it's your usual thing, it's like, I feel like saying it's an easy read doesn't do it enough justice, you know, because it is such a good story. But it is...
It's frictionless. It's a frictionless read.
Yeah, it's very comfortable to sit down and enjoy this book in a single sitting. You know, like, not because there's not a lot there, it's just a very comfortable read. Even if it doesn't look like it's your usual thing, it was like $13 on the Kindle reader. You might be able to get a hard copy wherever you live. I'm definitely going to invest in a hard copy after this. This has made my list of things that I like aren't my usual thing, but I've enjoyed it so much I want to have it so I can look at it. And just refer to it when I'm like, just feeling like I need to look at things to give me ideas and references and and enjoy the craft.
Well, it's 200 it's 260 pages, but it's technically twice that length, because as soon as you get to the end, you will end up having to go back from the start and reread the whole thing. Or at least that was my experience of it.
Yeah,
I read it as a 500-page comic
Yeah.
that just looped halfway through.
Exactly, and I'm going to get a copy of this, and I reckon my partner will sit down and devour this too. And they're not nearly as much into comics as I am. They read them, but they don't read them nearly as much as I do. But I think this is one that they'll really enjoy.
This isn't a comic, I don't think, that requires necessarily like a high level of like comics literacy. Like, I don't think I think you could give this to someone that hasn't really read a comic before, and they wouldn't have a problem like understanding it, following it.
No, I agree.
It's very clean and like, which isn't, I hopefully don't hope that doesn't come across like it's anything against the work, because that's exactly part of what makes this so enjoyable.
That feels like it's a deliberate thing, you know, like it is. It is designed that anyone can pick up and enjoy this book, and that's what like a good book should kind of be. That, in my opinion, that's one of the reasons why I love all of the books that I've picked for this show, is because like some of them have all got a lot of intense story and stuff going on, but you don't need to have read a comic before to pick it up and enjoy the hell out of it. You just need to know, I like sci-fi, I like fantasy, you know? Well, here's a good one. Read this, and anyone can pick it up and will enjoy it.
You just need to enjoy a nervous character, that's it.
Yeah, exactly. If you like characters, like pretty much anything that David Mitchell has ever played, then you will like this book.
For sure.
There are plenty of other actors and characters that I've got the vibes for this character from, but my little brain won't recall them right now. But
no, I think David Mitchell in Peep Show is a good.
Yeah.
It doesn't quite have like the slightly sort of meaner edge that David Mitchell had in Peep Show.
He's not as nasty or seedy as David Mitchell is, but he does seem just as despondent and unfortunate.
Yeah, it's that side of it, for sure, which he has in Spades.
Maybe a bit more like Simon Pegg's character in Spaced.
Yeah. He's basically, Fretwell is essentially, I think, most, when you look at a British person in a suit walking into their office building, that's slightly, slightly downtrodden, slightly beaten. That's Fretwell.
Yeah, 100%. But not in the like cool badass, he's gonna lose it and beat up the office bully today kind of way either. Just in that, this is my lot in life, I accept it.
Yeah, it's like Office Space. It's got like it's just going and sitting in your cubicle. It's that level of like broken.
Yeah, there's no escapist power fantasy. It's just the grind.
Yeah, for sure.
And it just keeps getting worse for poor Fretwell.
It's yeah, I don't know what to give it in terms of like I don't. It's such a hard because I've tried to recommend it to people, uh, and it's such a, I don't just don't know how best to sort of sum up like what it's doing, but it's I don't know. Yeah, it's just such a difficult like how do you sell it to someone because it really is just like the story of an unfortunate man where things become more and more unfortunate, but in a very like metatextual way by the end.
Yeah.
And I don't whenever I say that to people, like their eyes glaze over a little bit. They're like, "All right, yeah, it's not. It's yes, yeah, maybe it's not for me." But it really is just the cartooning is so wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
The pacing of it is so well crafted and so well defined. Um, the style of it is so kind of simple and easy to read, uh, but in that is hidden a lot of complexity. Like we were talking about all the reactions and the way that the faces are constructed and stuff. There's so much complexity hidden under the simple style of it that I think you look at it, it doesn't look threatening. It doesn't look like it would be anything that's like difficult or kind of
Yeah.
tough, and yet it gives you so much to chew on and so much to think about. Like honestly, this my genuinely my way of reading it was I read the whole thing and I stopped and went back to the start and read the whole thing a second
Yeah.
time, just back to back. Because there's
Yeah.
so much that you by the end that you realize that you like I've missed all these things, so much to chew back on, so much to enjoy. Um, and yeah, there's tons and tons and tons of complexity hidden under its
There
style.
really is. I'm flicking through it again while we talk, and I'm just noticing now. Like I noticed it when he went and sat down and ended up falling asleep next to the homeless guy, but I didn't
Yeah,
notice it when he first met him that the homeless guy has a little notebook that he's writing in.
yeah, right, yeah.
Yeah.
Everyone's a writer. Well, that's the other thing as well is that everyone is a writer.
Yeah.
The woman that he meets at the cafe
Yep.
that he
And
sort of accidentally wandered into this solicitation.
yeah.
Uh, she's a writer. The drunk guy he meets is a writer. The homeless guy's writing. Yeah,
Yep.
everyone's a writer.
Yep.
Everyone's an artist.
I think the easiest way I could probably describe this for me is that it's an enjoyable read about a sad little man.
That should be. I wonder what they describe it. I was going to say. I wonder if that's the. Are they? I mean, on the back it calls it a Kafka-esque dark comedy. That's quite good, to be fair.
Yeah.
That's quite a
Yeah.
good
Yeah. That is
description of
good.
it.
But
I think, yeah, a sad little man is.
yeah, because it is. It's very enjoyable read, but it is a story about a sad little man who's going through some
Yeah,
unfortunate bullshit.
I think that's yeah. I mean, that should be on the back as well. To be fair,
Yeah, well,
yeah.
feel free to use that for a pull quote if you want.
I like that the back calls Fretwell. Even the back is like mean to him. The synopsis says that he's a minor English writer. I love that even the synopsis is like because in the book, you know,
Ouch!
he had a successful book. In, like
Yeah.
Fretwell has a successful novel before the one that he's doing now. But like, yeah, I like that even the synopsis is
Oh,
tonally the synopsis
oh,
is on brand with the rest of the
oh, putting the boot in.
book.
Oh, actually, that you just us talking about that just then has actually just made me think of something that I'm gonna say right now for anyone that is watching this episode. Anything that I say about your book, if because I gush about these books, anything that I say about your book that is positive and you want to use it as a pull quote, go ahead, please do. I would love to see something that I've said praising one of these books in a promo somewhere as a pull quote. Oh,
Just Andy Watson's The Book Tour, sad little man.
yeah, enjoyable read about a sad little man. But no, for real, any creators that are reading this, Andy, if you're watching this, anyone who's watching one of the other episodes, and you know, I said something nice that you like about your book, you can go ahead and use that for a pull quote. Just the only favor I ask is tag me if you do, so I can see it and share it because I loved your book.
I'm going to use sad little man as my own pull quote for myself. Just get it embroidered on the back of a shirt. I like that.
I love that. I love that. Speaking of shirts, actually, they're
Oh,
available
nice.
on the Rainbow Studios Etsy store for anyone who likes the show and does want a shirt. I got it just in
Very
time to
nice.
finish making the last of this season, and I love it. I actually got a
I don't
beanie as well that just came in with the
I
logo
don't have
embroidered
anything
on it.
branded. I need to get my name
Yes.
sewn on. Yeah.
We're approaching the hour, so Sam, what have you got coming out in 2022? Like, you probably got too many books to mention, but what's about to come out that you are allowed to mention?
When do you think this will
This
air?
I'm in the process of editing right now. The editing process has been delayed a little bit by needing to reschedule the last couple of episodes, but I'm hoping to
Mhm.
have everything edited by the end of March so I can do the premiere in April.
Okay. Well, I think Rogues has been announced, which is like a DC Black Label book with a bunch of like the Flash's villains going into
Yep, yep, yep.
Gorilla City, and that's really good fun. So that'll be out. I've got a lettering
You
sheet
had me at the
open here.
Flash, so.
Yeah, I don't know that he's in it, or
Oh,
at
but
least
his
not as
villains
far
are
as I've
always
got.
entertaining.
But his villains are really good fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
What else? Oh, Blue Flame. I think that'll be ending soon. We're getting to the end of that, which I'm quite
Yes,
excited
that
about. Not that it's
reminds me.
ending, but I'm quite excited to see the ending of it.
Yeah, that
Um,
reminds me that my internet's back. I can pick up this week's issue.
yeah, that's a good one as well. I think it's issue 7. Rush. We're heading into the last issue, or we're heading into working on the last issue. I
Yep.
can't remember which one's coming out. That's a couple of Vault books. I've got a new Vault book that hasn't been announced yet, so I won't say anything about that. A couple of Valiant books that have just been announced. I'm working on the new Bloodshot with Dennis Camp and John and Jordi Belair is out some point this year, September maybe.
Yep, yep.
And Archer and Armstrong with Steve Fox, that's coming out soon. I think quite soon. We've done a couple of issues of that already.
Awesome.
Just stuff,
Yeah.
loads of stuff. Time Before Time. What's the furthest place from here? The new Bloodstained Teeth with Chris Ward, Patrick
Oh
Reynolds,
yeah,
Heather
I've
Moore, Heather
just picked up
Antos.
that so I can read that. I haven't read it yet, but I'm keen.
So that's there. And then there's I don't know, just all sorts, just a lot of different things.
Yeah, I will link a bunch of that in the description of the episode so people can go and find it. Because I'm gonna go and look for it myself anyway. I'm looking forward to a lot of that actually. So many good books coming out this year, and like Vault has just been announcing so many interesting teams that I
Yeah.
honestly don't give a fuck what the book is. Like I do, but I don't need to know what the book is because I've
Yeah.
seen the team.
Yeah.
Like I
Yeah.
already know that I'm gonna love it.
Well, we've got there's one that I don't think it's been announced yet, so I won't say anything too much about it. But another one that I'm working on, which is I'm really excited about with an
Adrian,
artist that
Damien, come
it's
and
an
tell me what
artist.
it is. Come and tell me what it is.
Yeah, I don't know if the team's been announced. Like I haven't been announced with it,
Yeah.
so I won't just in case. But not that anyone cares about the lettering anyway. But there's
You would be
one that
surprised. I have talked about your lettering a number of times in depth on this show.
Okay, well, in this one instance, different, but no, there's it's with an artist that I've been a massive fan of for a while, so I'm quite excited about that. And
Awesome. I can't wait. I can't wait.
yeah, I think they've got a whole bunch of good looking books coming soon as well. A whole bunch of cool creative teams.
Yeah, if I'm lucky, I'll have a couple of shorts out by the end of this year. So that's
Nice.
where people can find me. Look for Brain Beast Studios anywhere and everywhere, and you will find me and my work. I am in the process of updating my website to have previews of the shorts that I've done so far, so you can read the ones that are out for free, which is honestly only 2 right now, which is The Mothman Moves and The Man Who Found the Future. I wrote Mothman and had Minerva Fox on the art, and she did an amazing job. And Ryan Lindsay wrote The Man Who Found the Future, and I did the art for that, and Tobin Rascott did the lettering for both. But I've got like 7 shorts in the pipeline right now. And this is actually where it comes to that time of the episode where I say if you like the show, you like what I do, and you've seen what I'm working on and want to see more of it, consider liking, subscribing, signing up to Patreon, where you can support everything that I'm doing. You're going to get early looks at my scripts, concept art, playtesting copies of all of my TTRPG and board game stuff. It starts at $5 Australian, which is like $2 for you Brits with how strong the pound is, and maybe $3 for an American. And as soon as I hit like 10, 15 patrons, I get to start paying artists. I'm going to be drawing some of these myself, but I have dream teams that I want to work on some of these. And as soon as I hit that $150-ish mark, I can start paying page rates, and you will actually get to start reading these comics before the public does. So check out the links below. Consider signing up to that. Go check out PanelxPanel and Strip Panel Naked. I need to catch up on that. I started listening to it while I was working.
So do I.
Yeah. And then the old ADHD brain forgot that it existed until you mentioned it today. And I was like, yes, I need to rewatch that and listen to it again. That was like, I was consuming it wildly at the start of my comics journey at
Yeah.
Ryan's recommendation. And I was like, yes, this is great. Then just life happened and I forgot. Like, I've got so many podcasts I am so many episodes behind on. I have to catch up on Comics Inebriated as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, go follow Hassan. Sorry, Hassan, you go.
Yeah, I was just, it's this is not good promo for Strip Pound Naked, but it's the pace at which they come out is incredibly slow. But there should be a new episode out by the time this airs.
And
there
look,
should be another one finished.
It doesn't matter how fast or slow they come out. It's a good show, and Hassan's work at PanelxPanel and Strip Panel Naked is an invaluable resource to any and all creators. So go check it out. Go follow Hassan on social media. Where can they find you on socials?
I only use Twitter really. I'm at Hassan OE on Twitter.
There you go. That'll be linked below. Check out Hassan's stuff, and yeah, if you like the show and you want to see more of it, consider subscribing to Patreon. And if you want to see my comics actually be out in the world, consider subscribing to Patreon as well, so I can afford to make them. But we have been Sean Sunday and Hassan OE. This has been No Capes, the show where we talk about creator-owned comics with creators who own comics. This has been the book tour, which you will be able to purchase at the link below. Until next time, keep reading comics and keep having fun. Stay safe, everyone. It's crazy right now in the world. Look after yourselves.